Season 2, Episode 6 of So What's New in the Biscuit Tin. We have a real treat for you today for our episode, and you might notice that it's a different introduction to usual. We had to take the decision to do this because we had a bit of a technical fault. Throughout the episode, there are occasional places where you might hear a click sound. Don't worry, it's just Jess switching her mic on and off, because when we recorded this, she had a bit of a cold and she needed to have a bit of a cough. So you've got me at the beginning today telling you that we have a guest that is somebody we didn't know as a person on today's episode. We knew of them, we'd seen them, but we didn't know them. And we really hope you enjoy today's episode, because we were very lucky to have Mitch from Season 8 of The Sewing Bee on today's episode. So we really hope you enjoy listening.
Hello, Sam and Jess.
Hello!
Hooray!
Welcome!
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome.
We felt it was time that we branched out a little bit more with our guests as well, because thus far, I think when we started the pod, we were very much like, no one will want to speak to us. Yeah. And then we were like, actually, do you know what? Season 2, we're going to reach out to all the people we really, really want to speak to. So thank you very much for saying yes, because we're so excited to have you here. We love your account.
My pleasure.
So yeah, we're like, who would we love to talk to? Who do we feel brave to ask? So you are our first brave sort of person that we asked, wasn't it, Jess? So.
Yeah, we were sat there like, is he going to say yes? Hopefully he says yes. And you were like so quick back. And I was like, oh my God, we love this man.
I'm happy to talk sewing and biscuits. What's not to love?
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Speaking of, shall we begin with our traditional biscuit chat? Sam, what kind of biscuit are you?
I am something I have never mentioned before. And we've got all the way towards the end of season 2, and I have not mentioned this biscuit yet, and I don't know why. I am, and in theme with wearing a pink top today, everybody, I am a pink wafer biscuit.
How have they not come up?
And if you are as old as me, they used to have Pink Panther on the packet. I don't know if they still do, but
they did when I was a kid.
They still do.
They still do, right?
Yeah. So
I'm fortunate that I've got 2 young children, so I can still buy them. It's still acceptable.
Yeah, they are like a proper childhood biscuit, aren't they?
They are sort of synthetically pink, like nothing is that pink in nature. And there's something very enjoyable about that as a biscuit, where you're just like, oh, I do like a wafer as well.
And I don't know what that is in between them holding the 2 wafers together, do you?
Some kind of cream, I assume.
Yeah, some sort of cream. It's like custard cream if there was no custard and just more sugar.
Yeah,
it's very sugary. So for our American listeners, we probably need to explain it, because biscuits has been a real explaining issue. So if you think of like, it's sort of wafer. It's almost made of.
It's like an ice cream cone.
Yes,
it's like an ice cream cone, but thinner.
Made bright pink. And then sandwiched together. There's like lots of layers. It's kind of like what's in the inside of a Kit Kat, really, isn't it?
It is. It is a bit like the inside of a Kit Kat. Because if you're weird like me, and I'm saying, do you know what? I have way less shame than I used to when we did this. I'm throwing this out there. Some people, like me, will eat Kit Kats where they gently nibble the chocolate off the outside so you can see the wafer layers. And if you do that, it's pretty much the same type of biscuit. I know I'm the weird one here, but it's quite satisfying. So, throwing that out there, if you want to make your Kit Kat last longer, just very delicately doing that is quite fun.
Well, you know my opinion. I only like a Kit Kat when it's an accidental solid chocolate one. So...
So you don't like a Kit Kat, is basically what you're telling me.
It's easy to not get one, isn't it? It's just 99% of the time you don't get that.
Just get chocolate. Just buying a Kit Kat in the hope that it will be solid chocolate is just the weirdest way of denying yourself chocolate.
I know. You said you
just do it, mate.
Well, there you go. So I'm a pink wafer biscuit today. What about you, Jess? What are you today?
So I have gone back and forward on this because I feel intermittently like a selection of biscuit crumbs because I am at a PhD deadline at the moment and I literally cannot like write in a cohesive sentence anymore. Like I just can't do it. But also I'm going to see Taylor Swift at the weekend. So I feel like I should be some kind of sparkly biscuit. So maybe I'm like a selection box. Maybe that's what I am. Maybe I'm like a nice M&S selection box because I'm like all sorts
of broken biscuits because they're exciting. Everybody loves them.
They are great.
Also barely holding themselves together.
Yeah, I think that's where I am. And I just quite like, I really want there to be a way in which we just get the type of biscuits that we are at the end of each season and we just have like a sort of giant box. I was saying, Mitch, and I feel like this is something you would approve of, but I think we should play biscuit battleships on the podcast and we should each have different biscuits off camera and you should have to guess what each other have. And I think that would be so fun.
Absolutely. Picking up all the crunching as we eat them. I'm just like, I can't edit out that level of crunchiness. Just like...
They'd all have to be soft biscuits. If we left them all on the side for a couple of hours before recording, you'd be all right. You could edit around it.
That's true, yeah.
Oh my God, I love it. Now, so, Mitch, what biscuit are you?
Well, I've thought about this all day. It has preoccupied most of my day today. And I really wanted to say something classy, like a Viennese or something really nice. But actually, I think I'm specifically one of those cookies that you get from Subway that's a bit soft in the middle, with the odd garish chunk of brightly coloured chocolate. I think that is more me, just in general in life. Squidgy in the middle, but garish.
I have never seen these. I will have to look.
I know exactly what you mean, and I'll be honest. I don't think they're such a specific subtype of biscuit. Like you just don't get them So personally, I used to be able to eat them, and I can't anymore for various allergy reasons, but I'm always surprised they managed to keep their biscuit shape. I felt like if you left them too long, they would sort of slide off a surface, you know, like I don't know what Subway are doing with them, but they are great.
That is a wet dough they're using then, isn't it?
I love that.
They are a non-Newtonian fluid. I do think you could pour them.
Now, I have to say as well, Mitch has the best shirt on in the world. Is that me made?
It is. It's the first thing I ever made.
Oh my God. Tell us everything.
Yeah, I mean, it was the first thing I ever made, and it's what I wore on the Great British Sewing Bee. And it's a big fall pattern. It was something that I'd got gifted. So I said during COVID lockdown that I was going to make all of my wardrobe for when I went back to work. Nice shirts, because all men's shirts dead boring.
Yeah.
And I was given this pattern by my wife. She said, "This is easy. You'll manage this." And then it gets brought out all the time, and it's still held together. 4 years, I think it is now. I've been sewing, maybe 5. So yeah, it's African wax fabric, and unfortunately, and I quite like it, but I have given myself flower boobs with the pattern placement.
Do you know, I didn't want to say anything because I was just too obsessed with your shirt, but I was like, that pattern placement.
3 years of people being really polite and not saying anything.
Do you know what though? It's not that
brother, who's
noticeable.
got no interest in sewing, sent me a message. You know, you've got flower breasts. I was like, oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
It's really difficult with some fabrics, and I feel like we've definitely mentioned it before. Some of them
we have.
I'm always going to circle back to biscuits because Mitch's kids have made some today. But did you want to finish saying about his shirt?
I was just going to say that actually, like his shirt for first thing I've ever made. Genuinely, I was like, "Is that me made? Has he bought that?" Like, it's gorgeous. It's such really a stunning shirt. I love it. And I think with permission, the photo Mitch sends us to the thumbnail should have that shirt in it. I think that's what we should do.
I'll allow it.
It's like it's not a full button down, isn't it? It's like it's almost like it's sort of it's like
it feels like it.
Shirt.
It feels like a polo shirt. It's got a little bit of a stand collar, but not very much. And it's only buttons to here.
Nice. Yeah. So I need to circle back because while we were waiting for you to join us before the recording, Jess, Mitch mentioned there was a slight panic in his house this afternoon. Do you want to expand, Mitch?
Yeah. Well, I said that I was doing the podcast, and the boys asked me what the podcast was about, and I didn't just say it's about biscuits, but I did say that there's a very biscuity spin to the sewing podcast. And then we had a mad panic that we'd not got any biscuits in the house. So the moment they got home from school, and we have baked. This is full of biscuits.
Oh my God.
So I've got a Tupperware, which. We've just made loads of butter biscuits. We'll be eating them now for weeks. And I realised they're not integral because this is an audio medium. Nobody's going to see the biscuits. But I felt like, for authenticity, I needed the biscuits with me.
No, absolutely. We support that.
Yes.
We do, or we have, oh my God, no, this is biscuit related news, and I have to talk about this because it's the first time I've seen Sam. I went to a conference 2 weeks ago, and the infamous lemon melt biscuits were there on the side in little packets.
Picture on Instagram. I was like,
oh my God.
I've never seen that.
I'm not kidding. So they had all of their different types of biscuit, and then all my Scottish friends messaged me and were like, oh, those are the best biscuits. And I was like, guys, my Scottish friends messaged me and they were like, oh my God, how do you not know what these are? And I fully missed them, but apparently they're institution. But I had like 4 packs of them, and it was great. I was just chomping away through that conference. It was fantastic.
Biscuit chat. Mitch, you are the first person to ever bake biscuits to bring on the pod, though. Just a shame it's not smell-o-vision and I can't smell them and eat them. But I've got biscuit news as well. I was in Sainsbury's the other day, and they had a speciality custard cream variety in there.
Oh, I was deeply disturbed by this. We're going to put a photo on the Instagram. I can't. Please, Sam, please explain. Because I'm too horrified to speak.
Custard cream twists, and it says with a peach and cream flavour filling.
I mean,
never heard.
I'm not okay.
I don't think I'm on board with that, no.
No, there's 60p a pack, so it's worth getting a pack to take a risk on it, I have to say.
I don't know.
I'm not sure how I feel about that.
I feel like I've not tasted a non-custard cream, and I'm quite happy not to break my duck on that one. Like, I'm quite happy to just stay with the existing biscuit genre.
You missed out, Jess, at the last sewing social. Mary bought the chocolate-covered custard creams.
Were they good?
Oh, they're amazing. Mitch, have you had them?
No, I've never had them.
Specialty. They do chocolate-covered custard creams and chocolate-covered bourbons.
I know they do the double-stuffed bourbons and the double-stuffed custard creams. They're a bit special.
Yeah.
I don't know. Side note here. I'm not great with the double-stuffed biscuits. I feel like the ratio's wrong. And there's something about it that both visually and like mouthfeel wise I feel strange about, but that might just be me because Sam knows I'm very specific about certain things, and for some reason I look at them and I go, oh, it's just wrong. It's like today I was going to get my hair done, and my hairdresser's is next to like it's up on one of the industrial units, and it's next to like a car repair shop, but they also do like mods to people's cars, and there was an old Suzuki Jeep there, but it had been racked right up on really high wheels, and it just looks really incongruous. And that's how I feel about double stuffed biscuits. I'm like, that bit looks right and that bit looks right, but they don't look right together. I feel strange about it.
I can tell you though, you need to try a chocolate covered custard cream. I don't know how they've done it, but it's amazing. But I can only eat one. Normally I can eat good few custard creams in a row. You can only eat one of those. They're so sweet.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to say the next sewing social I come to in September, we should have some, but I will be sewing my wedding dress, so I will not have anything chocolatey anywhere near me at all. I'm too accident prone. Oh my goodness. Although I'm on version 3 of my wedding dress and it's going well. So, you know, we're on track. And then Sam keeps joking that the next sewing social I come to where I'm doing it, she's going to put a curtain up in the corner so I can sew behind it so no one sees my dress. I reckon we just swear them to secrecy.
I was going to say NDAs all round, really.
NDA, that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of group sewing and all sorts of lovely things, we have had Mitch on the podcast today not only because he's just fabulous and clearly very committed to the biscuit ethos by baking some, he's welcome back, guys. But we also wanted to do this episode to talk a little bit more about ways you can take your sewing to the next level. Now, for some people, that might be the small business vibe. For some people, that might be teaching. For some people, that might be going on a show like Sewing Bee and really seeing what your sewing's like. And I think at this point, Mitch, it'd be great if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and your sewing and what drove you to go on to Sewing Bee as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my learning curve for sewing has been quite steep. I went from sewing badges onto my kid's scout uniform to being on the Sewing Bee within a matter of months, really.
Oh, wow.
And if it wasn't for COVID-19, I possibly would have never learned to sew. It was my wife and I decided we were going to do what we call our apocalypse skills. So I taught her how to make biscuits, make bread and things like that. Yeah. And she taught me how to knit and how to sew. And the sewing just really, really stuck. I'm rubbish at knitting, and that has not
I
stuck,
can't do it. My hands don't do it.
So I have moved on from that, and we don't talk about my last knitting attempts. But sewing really stuck, and because I was at home and I had loads to do, we set up this, make your own wardrobe so you're me-made for when you go back.
I love that.
And, at that time we thought, we're only going to have a week off. I was furloughed and a week, then it was 2 weeks, then it was 3 weeks. Then we were off again. So it went on and on and on. And I started making things we had a friend's birthday coming up, and I made things for my boys, and made things for my wife. And all of a sudden I'd made loads of different garments for all different sorts of people really quickly. And Lisa, my other half, said to me, "Oh, actually, you're not bad at this. I think you should apply to go on the Sewing Bee. You've got nothing else to do." And I did say, well, by this point, we'd maybe 3 months down the line. And I went back to work, and I came home one day, and she'd started filling in the application. So,
wow.
So I did what I thought was the right thing and said yes. And I didn't think I'd get on the Sewing Bee at all, and was worried because when you start a hobby and you really love it, I don't know if either of you are like me, but I can get carried away and overdo something when I first start.
Yes.
Like if I find a pattern I love, I'll make it and I'll make it and I'll make it and I'll make it until I get a bit sick of making it.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah. Yeah, I've done that with several patterns.
Yeah, you're like a rip. To be fair, I have 4 chalk and notch fringes, and I make no regrets to that, really. Yeah. But I love that. I think it's really quite brave, though, if you have gone on, like, if you have just started something. I don't know about you guys. I'm always like, it's my hobby. I kind of don't want people to watch how I sew, because I don't want people to go, why are you doing that? That's so incredibly wrong. Whereas it works for me and I'm happy and I'm cracking on. But even at Sewing Social, sometimes I'm like, am I going to do something? And everyone's going to go, what are you doing? That's not how, do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Especially if you're self-taught, because you've had nobody to show you the right way to do the things. You've just learned to do them and they've sort of worked. So you've carried on doing that. I mean, when I first started sewing, my sewing circle was my wife who could sew and my mum who could sew. And they were never going to tell me anything was rubbish anyway, apart from my wife. If I made it for her and she refused to wear it, then I'd know I'd maybe made some boo-boo somewhere. So yeah, it's a strange thing, but it was a strange time and you didn't really consider how, I suppose the word's invasive, it's going to be putting your skills or lack of under a microscope. When you're on the Sewing Bee, there's between half a dozen and a dozen cameras in the room at any one time. And you're being watched constantly. And the moment you make a mistake, a camera on a crane swoops in, and you've got somebody asking you, what have you done wrong? So it really does. It's a bit of a baptism of fire. But I think, as opposed to making me not want to to try and do that. It definitely made me want to be better. And one of the things you don't get to see on the Great British Sewing Bee is that you actually get an awful lot of help and advice as well from the judges and the sewing team that work for the production company. And that stuff I use every day. And you sort of become a Z-list sewing celebrity. So people ask your opinion on things. So it forces you to get better much quicker than you would if you just sat at home with your machine learning pattern by pattern. And then, you know, eventually get the confidence to start hacking your patterns and making your own things. But it really goes back to, you said something in a throwback to series 1 of the podcast about everybody being naturally creative. You know, everybody's creative. They just don't know how they're creative. Yeah. And I think when you're forced to be, like I was at that point, you either sink or you float. And so far, I'm still floating. The boat's still floating, and I'm still loving it. So
that's brilliant.
You know, you have to learn quickly and get better quickly, because people think because you were on the telly sewing, you actually know something about it. And at the beginning, that wasn't necessarily true.
But it is so interesting, though. I mean, one of the biggest sort of, I think everyone has those lessons they learn. And one of the best ones I ever learned, and I do remind myself of it all the time, is the fact that someone else may know how to do something better than me, but I might know how to do something entirely different in a different way to them. And it's not necessarily that it's like, that person might be incredible at putting in zips, but can't do a buttonhole to save their life. Or like, their skill is so relative. But like,
I think sewing crosses over from one person. Some people love like the middle challenge on the sewing bee, the like upcycle.
It's my idea of hell.
Fashion one, exactly, and it's your idea of hell, and it's my idea of heaven, because that's where like my brain goes off on all weird tangents, and I think that's why sewing can really cross across so many different types of people, because just down to like the way some people combine patterns like a fabric together and all that sort of thing, there's so much to it. It's not like one set technical skill, I think, isn't it? I'm pleased to hear, Mitch, that it's not put you off sewing, because I did wonder, is it so intense that afterwards you just feel almost like burnt out? But did you feel fired up afterwards, or did you need a break?
Somewhere in between. What I needed was to sew without a clock and without somebody shouting at me 15 minutes. So, which occasionally now, my wife would like to play with the sewing bee PTSD and will occasionally come into the sewing room and shout 15 minutes.
Oh my God. I love your wife. I've never met her, but she sounds fantastic.
Yes, she very much is. But you know, it made me want to learn more, because what's really interesting about my time on the sewing bee is afterwards you have a long conversation and you get together with the judges and you all meet up afterwards when the series is wrapped anyway and talked about the show basically. And like you're saying about different areas of expertise, Patrick and Esme, and they've been saying this for a decade, would never apply to go on because they could not do what we're asked to do in the time. And I, you know, most of my bees, and we've had this conversation and they don't mind me saying it, I won't say names, but the technically best sewer didn't win our series. You know, that because they took so much time perfecting everything that they did. And if it wasn't perfect, they'd unpick it. In the scenario where you've got a couple of hours to knock up a ball gown out of a pile of rubbish, you can't have that perfection, which is where those people that are out of the box thinkers, creatives that don't focus on the detail and the finish do really well. And there's got to be room for both sorts of people. One of the most wonderful things about the sewing community is it is a really broad church.
It's quite interesting. We've done a different episode that's coming out, that will be out by now when this episode comes out, about sewing perfectionism and how it can be a positive and a negative, because having those lovely finishes can be a wonderful thing, but sometimes it can hold you back from being super creative, can't it?
Well, this is the thing, and we know that when it comes to sewing, I am much more of a champion of if perfectionism is stopping you sewing, throw the perfectionism out, not the sewing. Because it's, at the end of the day, particularly if you're wearing it, does it matter? Like, obviously, it's nice. It's nice to have a lovely seam finish. But if you can still wear it, you still feel great in it, no one knows that your back seam isn't overlocked. No one knows that you forgot to press your sleeve. Yeah. It's the kind of thing where it's like, is it holding you back? Is it the kind of thing you can fix and you can just quickly do it? Fine, go and do it. But if you're gonna sit and stew, like we do know someone whose perfectionism really does stop them sewing.
Yeah.
And that's a real challenge, because you kind of need to reframe why you're sewing if it's getting to that point.
I mean, I'm so far down the other end, it's unbelievable. I literally wore a top to work because I was desperate to wear it. I hadn't even hemmed it. I just couldn't risk it coming untucked. There is doing some nice finishes, and there's actually just finish it.
Oh, yeah.
I think as well, I think it depends what it's for. I know if I'm making something for somebody else, it will take me at least double the amount of time as if I was making it for me. Like if I was knocking up a shirt to go to a sewing social in or to a friend's party, I might knock it up in an afternoon. But if I was making it as a gift, I would spend a lot longer and put extra effort into the finish inside and all of that. So it does very much vary. But I think in general, I mean, if any of the listeners watched my episode that I was on the sewing bee, you'd notice that chaos is probably the word to describe how I work. So I think my daily sewing is definitely more towards that end of the spectrum. It's like I keep looking and I keep looking at getting an app to organise all of my fabric stash. I keep looking at Stash Hub and I think, I could do that, but sometimes it's fun to just walk in and grab whatever I see.
That's what I do.
And I like that chaos.
I think there's something beautiful to be said about that. And I do think that like the sewing bee is really interesting, because I'm going to ask you now, I've always wondered this. When you get given a pattern for like the first round where they give you a pattern to make, can you just go grab fabric? How does it work? Do they say you can only use this section of the haberdashery? Is it just a free-for-all? Like, how does that work?
Well, depends on what it is. So you are often told in that brief at the beginning by Esme, it must be made of wool, for example, or it must be a denim, or... So that does narrow it down, and they do alter the haberdashery for you. They put a couple of red herrings in there so that you can slip on. Yeah. It's but it's to it's just to test that you have some sort of idea what you're doing, and it makes good TV.
Yeah.
But the way it's edited, it looks very much like you're given the pattern, and everybody runs to the haberdashery and picks what they want.
Yeah.
Usually. People do take a minute just to have a look at the pattern.
Because I've always wondered this. I'm like, why are you picking this when you don't know what you're making? But that makes way more sense.
Yeah. I mean, with the limited time, you are not going to have a chance to sit down and read through every page before you get going. And depending on what the challenge is, especially the middle challenge, that reinvention challenge.
Yeah.
All there is what you see. When they lift off that cloth and there's a pile of jogging bottoms, that's all there is. So you do have to be relatively quick and don't have an awful lot of time to think about it. So, but that first one where you've got the pattern, it tends to be read at least the first page of the pattern so you know roughly where you're going with it, then go and grab your stuff. And then have a breakdown, and then you'll be done.
See, that's the bit I think that scares me, is I don't want someone else editing me. I feel weird about like I don't mind Sam editing me because she knows me, it's fine. But like there's something really that concerns me. I remember Claire, she's Claire Bradders on Instagram, but I can't actually remember what her exact last name is. And she won her series.
Yes.
And I remember her saying that if you want to make sure the cameras don't come find you if you've done something wrong, you have to be really careful not to swear. Because if they pick you up swearing under your breath, they'll come over and be like, what have you done? Is that true?
Well, there is a way to work around it. And we'd worked this out by the second task. If you're having a bad time, if you get the person sewing next to you to swear, you can't be in trouble for swearing. And they still can't use the footage. So that is the perfect workaround. So Debs, who was sewing next to me on my series, I kept looking over to her and gave her the look, and she would have a swear in Welsh, and then they'd leave me alone for a little bit to cry into my.
Oh my god, that's fantastic! What a workaround. One other question I have, just while we're doing sewing bee questions, is. One of my biggest things, I can't sew wearing shoes. Or at least I need one shoe off, really, because it's weird. What are the rules in the sewing room? How comfortable can you get? Is it quite like I have to go on TV? So.
They've changed, and I'm really annoyed about the change, and I've written a strong letter to the BBC about this. We were not allowed to take our shoes off. We had to sew in shoes. And I had made... and it was my own error. I'd decided, I think I wore Doc Martens.
Oh, no.
Well, you can't feel anything in them.
No, it's like driving in Doc Martens. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
You know, they're lovely, but then I would take certainly the right one off and sew just in my sock.
Yeah.
You know, that's how I sew. We were told we weren't allowed to. Now, I don't know whether that was because it was the first we filmed in Leeds. We were the first lot to film in Leeds.
Right.
And obviously COVID as well, but I don't know what your feet had to do with COVID.
Yeah, I was going to say.
We were told that we weren't allowed to take our shoes off. However, I've been watching. This is going to sound very strange. I have been watching the feet of the sewers on the current series,
This
and loads
is a
of them have got
sewing
the
thing,
shoes
guys.
off. Loads of them have got the shoes off.
One of them's got like these amazing slippers with like bunny ears on or something, haven't they?
Yeah.
I've missed
How different it could have been if I'd been able to be barefoot.
But this is the thing, though. I feel like I could probably sew something in 3 hours if I could do it half dressed with one shoe on and Netflix on in the background. I'd be fine. That's how quickly I sew normally. But I can't sew fully dressed with shoes
cup
on.
of tea halfway through, barefooted,
Exactly.
I'll be fine.
Yeah.
It's like there's so many people. There was a lady I was chatting to who was like, I can never go on sewing bee because I can't sit in my knickers in between trying stuff on. And I was like, no, I think they frown on that. But I was like, it's a vibe. When I first started sewing, there's a lady I remember chatting to. I cannot remember her Instagram handle for the life of me. But I was doing like a sewing fails, embarrassing sewing stuff on my story because I just put a needle through my finger. And I was like, guys, make me feel better. Like I'd properly got my sewing machine through my hands. I was like... I'm like, oh, guys, cheer me up. And this woman was like, we just moved house. I was sat in my underwear sewing, looked up at the window. Postman stood there knocking on the window with a parcel. And she sat there and she finished her message by saying, I wasn't even in nice underwear. I was in my, my That's the most sewing thing in the world. I loved it.
It wasn't even me made.
Exactly. I was like, I don't think it makes a difference. And I was like, I think you're going to have to move. I mean, like, I don't think I could face the postman again. But it is.
The good news is nowadays we rarely get the same postman for more than a couple of weeks, do we? So
That is true. That is true. But I don't think I think I would just die. I don't think I would recover. But it is interesting for the sewing bee.
Yeah. One of the things I was thinking about on the sewing bee is I would really struggle without my phone because if I don't know how to do something, I always look it up. And you can't do that.
Yeah. Oh my God, I just make it up.
They get collected up at the start of the filming day and you don't get them back till the end.
Yeah. See, that's the bit that would really throw me because I'll watch a quick YouTube video on something or look at how to do it. I think that's the thing that puts me off doing it because I'm so... Like, I use all the resources available to help me when I'm stuck, and you can't. You've just got Patrick giving, like, a little eyebrow raise at you, you know?
Yeah.
That's wild. I had never... Okay, I'm going to sound ridiculous now. I have never looked up how to do anything. I look it up afterwards and go, I could have done that better. But for some reason, it's just clicked in my brain that I'm allowed to look it up while I'm sewing. I always just make it up. I was looking at it and I go, it'll be fine. We'll just make it work. But you have literally just made me realise I'm allowed to look stuff up while I sew.
Well, Jess, I'm glad we've got to nearly the end of season 2 and I've given you that gift.
I've been sewing for a decade. I've been sewing for so long.
If I'd started sewing when I was your age, I'd have probably still had to pop to the library to look stuff up.
Well, I would ask my mum, and my mum would tell me a very, very long explanation of how you should do it that wouldn't go in because I didn't know any of the surrounding knowledge required to make that helpful.
I mean, I think that's the thing that makes sewing so accessible today, because if I'd started sewing when I've always sewn, but I used to sew stuff where my mum was around. But if I'd wanted to do it off my own back, I would have literally had to book an afternoon to go to the library to get a book. But now, if I'm going to do a new pattern, I'll probably do like a little bit of YouTube research and just watch a couple of people talking about the pattern before I make it, because I just gets me in the zone, you know.
Can I just say though, you're such a teacher. Look at you doing lesson prep. I love that though, because you're so good at taking advantage of all of the resources you are and I do think that's such a strength. As you know, I was brought up in an instructions are cheating household. I still don't really read instructions unless it's absolutely necessary, but it is, I think when it comes to the sewing bee, I think that's something I always think about, where you only get instructions, don't you, for that first challenge? Do you get an image of what it's meant to look like, or do you just get instructions?
You get some instructions, is what I'm going to say. It is not a full set of instructions. There is an awful lot of instructions that are just expecting you to know how to do it. Like add a collar.
Assumed knowledge then.
Yeah, you'll get just one line, add a collar. And
lovely.
And if you've never done that before, which depending on, on the sewing bee, there's all different sorts of experience, and even the people that are really experienced may never have made anything with a shirt collar. It's difficult, but that's there to make good TV. I think what people forget, and I think the sewing bee is brilliant in that it has brought loads of new people into the sewing community, and that's great. But it's not an instructional sewing program. It's an entertainment program. If you want to learn, go to YouTube or down the library.
Or somewhere in the middle. But it is TV. And I always think this as well, like when people make questionable fabric choices, that the more experienced you are, you go, oh, that's not going to work. But they don't realise it's going to work.
Absolutely.
But for the TV, that's why it's there, is to create jeopardy and to create experiences.
Absolutely, and some of it, it's just out of your hands, because if you're on the show for quite a while, because it's all filmed consecutive, you don't go home. You start filming the sewing bee until you're knocked out the sewing bee.
Right.
And you don't go home in between. Oh wow.
No, there was in the middle of filming there was a break where people could go home, but no, you do an episode, a short break of maybe a day. Wow. Episode, short break.
Wow.
So it's really intense. And my year, obviously with all the COVID restrictions as well, from me starting the process of locking down to be able to go onto the show to me coming home, bearing in mind I was only on the show for 1 week, it was nearly a month that I hadn't seen my family for.
Oh, wow.
Because I had 2 weeks at home where you were told to isolate from them and test several times a week. Then we went to the filming location and we were isolated there for a few days before we started filming, and were tested every day. And then we filmed. So you had quite a long, intense period, which isn't exactly the same for every series, but it is why when you watch the programme you think, oh, for people that have only met each other an hour ago, they're quite close.
Yeah, they seem quite friendly, but yeah,
you are forged in fire. And again, I go back to, I do in general think the sewing community is really supportive. It's so easy to forget it's competition.
Yeah,
so easy to forget.
It doesn't feel like a competition when you watch it, if you know what I mean. Like it doesn't. Yeah. It just feels like a group of people sewing things, and you're sort of offering it up to the judges to judge you, but it doesn't feel competitive when you watch it. But I suppose that
doesn't feel competitive when you're there. And I think as well, because if you went on the Bake Off, you'd get a book deal at the end of it. The Sewing Bee, not so much. Yeah. So it's not really high stakes. So people just enjoy it. There's no the end goal is to have sewn some really lovely things and still be there. So I think that makes a difference as well.
Yeah,
definitely.
It's quite interesting though, because the season you was on, I was having a little look again the other day. Quite a lot of people on your season have gone on to do other sewing related things, haven't they?
Yeah, we had, and I think you've seen it year on year, gradually getting a younger average makeup of contestants on the Bee, and there were a lot that were fractionally younger than me that are tech savvy enough to run with it and go and do the influencery thing, and whereas I'm really rubbish at it. I'll post a video every 3 weeks that might be vaguely sewing related. It might be me making a birdhouse. It might be me. It could be absolutely anything. It's always a raffle. I'm definitely good value if you follow me on socials, but they're really good every day, promoting what they do and building that sewing brand.
Well, there's a few of them I already knew on your season. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go on, Jess. Sorry.
No, I was going to say there was a few people I already. So we're now getting to a weird point where, from your season, and then the next 2 or 3, I've known at least 2 or 3 people in each season. From Instagram, of people I've chatted to and messaged, and like Vicky and stuff I'd collabed with. So it was such a weird feeling to be like, oh, so and so. And I do feel like there are more and more people going on it who have an existing online presence already before they go in. And I do think it helps to get a younger audience, because you go, oh, it's so and so, like Lauren. I already knew Lauren before she went on. Yeah. And I love her to bits. She's fantastic. But it was that weird feeling where I'm like, hang on, that's her, and Vicky's there. What's going on? And like in your season, you had Gil, who I already knew of, and like I think it's quite. I feel like they are picking more and more people, or having a balance of people. But there are every year a few more people with those bigger Instagram followings, and I don't know if that is just to get more of a diverse audience. But it is interesting.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, it is interesting, and people every year. You can guarantee every year people will complain that the times are getting shorter. People will complain that the expectations of the sewers are too high every year. And you'll always get somebody every year saying, oh, the standard's not as good as last year. Always. Guarantee. Absolutely guarantee it. Oh, yeah. But I think what it shows you is the viewing figures go up and up and up every year. Even last week, even though the Euros had started, it still didn't really impact the Sewing Bee viewer numbers.
That's insane.
And you look at all the research done by big companies like Hobbycraft, the number of young people that are buying machines for the first time, that goes up every year as well. And I did wonder after COVID whether people would down tools and go, well, that's that. That's history now, and it'll sit and gather dust. Whereas actually, no, people have really started to take it up, and that's part of, once you get into it, and I think once sewing becomes less scary and less unattainable, and the machines aren't scary things with blades and needles, I think then when people realise it, they go, actually, this is something that's part of my life. It's not a hobby. It's part of me.
I would agree. I also think it's quite interesting because, so I have been sewing on and off for about a decade, and I'm mostly self-taught. My mum taught me to sew in a straight line and taught me how to thread a machine, and then from there everything else has been me, because I went off with my sewing machine. But when I first started sewing, there was no kind of community in the same way online. There was no one to speak to, really. The YouTube was not as advanced, there wasn't as much stuff to do, but it felt quite gatekeepy. If I went into my local fabric shop up in Scotland where I'm from, it felt a bit, you'd be like, oh, I'm looking for a pattern, and someone would go, you shouldn't start there, you should have to make a shirt, and you should do this, and I'm like, oh, okay. Whereas now, you can go onto Instagram and you can say, guys, what shall I make? And there's so many beginner-friendly indie patterns, and there's all of these instructions on YouTube, and there's lovely independent fabric shops as well. And I don't know, it just feels way less sort of like we're gatekeeping sewing. It feels a lot more like we're going, come and sew, which is beautiful, I think.
And I think as well, and I wonder how much Sewing Bee has had an effect on this. People want to be with other people and sew together. That's the thing that seems to have grown and grown. And I run a virtual social, and I'm not the only one. There's other people running them, and the in-person socials. People want to sit with other sewers and almost experience like that Sewing Bee camaraderie of, if it's going wrong, it's okay because someone else will make you feel better because they're sat next to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do quite a lot of talks around the country for all different groups of people, and one of the big things is how good it is as a social tool. I mean, I've got panic disorder. I have terrible social anxiety, which sounds ridiculous considering I've been on the TV and my background before sewing was theatre. But I really struggle to have conversations one-on-one with people, and sewing, it created an atmosphere where I was able to be social and get passionate about something that was sort of safe and cozy, and it can be a little bit kitsch, but it's also new and adventurous, and there is a broad range of people that you in any other walk of life would never get together and socialise. Whereas sewing can throw them together.
Yeah. It's I agree with you, and I'm an introvert, but where anything to do with sewing, and no one would know because I can talk about it without feeling like I'm out of my comfort zone, because small talk is the scariest thing in the world for me. But all the while I'm with people talking about sewing, I'm either learning from them or sharing tips and things I've got, and like you were saying, Mitch, it allows me to be able to be sociable in a way that feels comfortable for me.
Yeah.
I do think that's interesting though, because I come from a slightly different angle on this. As Sam knows, I'm not a very social sewer. I don't actually really like other people being there while I'm sewing. Sewing is very much my moment for me, but that's because I have done for years a very involved job where I'm constantly talking to people. And I kind of want to sew, and I want to freely effing blind and be half dressed and have a glass of wine or tea and have a really terrible rom-com on. And it's like, that's my little space for me to sew, and I don't have to be like aware of my surroundings. And it's quite interesting because I did a video recently about tips for going to socials, because there are lots of sewists like me. And I do think one of the biggest things like that came out of that video and chatting to people, because I do come to the Southern Social every now and then when I've plucked up the courage, is a lot of people are quite scared of having their sewing judged when they go and sit with other people, because they're self-taught, because they've learned at home through COVID. I know, Sam, your virtual socials are very popular, and I think that's a really nice way of people dipping a toe in social sewing while staying in their own space.
And they've come to those first and then asked about the real ones and then come to the real one. And I think once you've been, I've worked really hard with my in-person ones to make sure that nobody feels that they're anything other than just in a welcoming group of people where you can
it's fantastic.
Be silent if you want or chat. And I keep the numbers to maximum of 14, because then even if you don't want to talk, you don't feel like you've been left out. You're not like in the corner on your own.
You can still listen, and it's brilliant space. It's beautiful, because I do think like there are lots of sewists like me who, when they go to something like that, are terrified. And they're like, oh God, I don't want to do something and everyone think I'm doing it wrong, or I don't want to speak to people and it'd be all scary because I'm doing my hobby. And like, I think that you do such a good job of curating a space that is very friendly. and very welcoming. And I mean, seriously, I don't know how you do it, because it's like anathema to me. It's so cool.
It's just silly little things like I greet every single person at the door, particularly people who've not been before, because then you're not having to walk in on your own. Because actually, if you're anxious, the last thing you want to do is walk into a space where everyone's already sat down and you don't know where to sit.
Oh God, yeah, you're really good at going, sit here, do this. And I think that's something that, like, a lot of sewists, particularly sewists who learned in lockdown, yes, there is, I think, a craving from some people to be social, but from others, it's taking your hobby outside. And while being good at a hobby is not really the point of doing it, it can cause you to compare yourself sometimes if you put yourself in a space like Sewing Bee or in a room full of other sewists where you go, everyone else is so much better at this. Or the weird one, I went to my first social and my friend I went with was chatting away. She sewed 2 seams in like 6 hours, and I finished something and made something else, and I didn't realize I was a fast sewist, but I sat there like, help, what's happening? I don't know, maybe
to get Jess a pattern off the swaps table.
We did,
so
yeah. I was like, I'm done. What are we doing? But I do think, I don't know, did you feel self-conscious at all going into the Sewing Bee space with your level of sewing being quite new?
Oh, absolutely, massively so. I felt a little bit better when I did the interviews. We did one round of interview with lots of other potential bees, and you went down and met the producers in Manchester, and you took some garments with you, but a lot of it was seeing how you interacted with other people in the space. And at that point, you got to see the mix of people that had also applied, and that made me feel a little better because there were other people at a similar level. Mm-hmm. And it definitely, you get asked when you audition to be on, do you think you could win the competition? And my answer to that was, if I have 10 really good days and the other people have 10 really bad days, yes, I could. Because I think with sewing, you can be brilliant and you can come up against a make that's just awful. It just doesn't, you don't enjoy it, you're not good at it, you get things wrong. And, you know, that's the beauty of sewing, is it doesn't matter how good a sewer you are, you've still got things to learn, and you've still got things that you mess up. And you can be somebody who's brand new, and you can make something that you adore, that you wear every week, and that, in the case of this, has lasted being worn every week for 5 years without being repaired. And I think because sewing is that fluid, it means that, and I think this is something that people that are new to the sewing community, I hope, learn very quickly, is that it doesn't really matter what level you're at. What matters is your level of enjoyment for doing it.
Yeah.
And that's the big thing. And I think one of the wonderful things about sewing socials is, for me, when I went to my first ever social, I was terrified because I thought, well, this is going to be lots of people that do it all the time that are going to be really, really good. And I'm going to rock up with with whatever I rock up with. And it wasn't like that. It was just lots of people in a room being passionate about something together. And like you've just said, some people did 2 seams. I'm sure some people do less, because what you get out of sewing is so personal.
Yeah.
For some people, it's making beautiful, catwalk-worthy garments, and that's brilliant.
Oh, yeah.
For some people, it's a tool for them to become more socially included in a group. It's a tool for them to be a little bit creative, because I think, especially when you become an adult, you have less and less opportunity to be creative. And sewing allows you to play.
Yeah.
It allows you to play. And I also think, and this was one of the things that scared me with a little bit of gatekeeping in the sewing community, is that how precious fabric is, and it makes you almost scared to touch some fabric. Yeah. And actually, what I've learned is, well, I never have to throw away fabric. If I mess something up severely, I can make it into something else.
Yeah.
And that's a wonderful thing, and you only learn that by doing that. Yeah. Doing things with scraps and using things with scraps is something that I think everybody who's progressing from sewing, once you've got the basics of cutting out a pattern and putting a garment together, start learning to do things with your scraps, because then you never have any waste and you never feel bad. And if I really mess up what I'm making, I can make it into something else.
Yeah, it takes the pressure off a bit, doesn't it? Yeah,
it does.
Yeah. I think as well, remembering that bar cutting out, everything else you do is reparable. Everything else you do can be unpicked. Everything else you do can, there's so few things you can do that badly wrong that you might want to swear and throw it at the wall and do the classic, I'm going to take a break right now, and then you can come back and unpick it. It's not the end of the world, but it can feel like it. Now, I think now is a really good moment to segue into our dilemma, because I knew I had one for this episode. So we have had someone message me, but for the pod, said, absolutely love the pod, guys. Can't wait for season 2. I was wondering if you could give me some advice, as I just don't feel like my sewing is getting better no matter what I do. I'm sewing loads, I'm trying new patterns, I'm trying tried and tested, but I feel like I'm constantly making the same mistakes. Do you have any tips? We've all been there.
Yeah. Mitch, have you got thoughts on that?
It's a good dilemma. And and you're right, we have all been there and we have all felt like that. I think for me, and it's something you've spoken about on this podcast before, you've spoken about palette cleansers, and you've spoken about those cozy patterns that you can make that make you feel good. Maybe take a step away from what you're trying to make something easier, make something more simple that's just going to bring you the joy of doing it.
Yeah.
I'm also a big Lego fan, and I always it's like I've listened before.
He did his homework, guys.
Yeah. And I always tell people sewing is like a big soft Lego or a big soft jigsaw, and if you make something that is only a couple of pieces, a small pack of Lego, one, it will make you feel good because you'll have a finished product that you can use straight away, or put on a shelf and let it gather dust, or even worse, the children will touch it and then it'll be destroyed. Yep. And that goes for sewing, Lego and jigsaw, whichever analogy you'd like. But make something really simple. What I like to do is if I've made something really challenging that I've struggled with and I've not enjoyed, and I've not got that sense of joy and freedom at the end of it and that pride, I'll tend to go and make a pillowcase, because it's just a big square and it's easy, and it's easy, but I can be as creative as I want with it.
Yeah.
And that's my palette cleanser, because I know I can do it. It won't take me a lot of time. I can make it as fancy as I want to make it, or as plain as I want to make it. And there's nothing that can really, I say that, there's nothing that can really go wrong. And then that might give me just that little bit of breathing space in sewing, that I can go back to that really challenging thing, and things that were hard before won't be, because I've given myself the mental space. It's nothing to do with your practical skill, because so much of sewing is muscle memory. You learn to do it and you keep doing it and you get better at it. It's not that you can't do it, it's just that you can't do it yet.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating.
Is so important.
Yeah, and it can be frustrating that yet, but you will get there.
Yeah. And I do think if someone's making the same mistake, it might be that actually you might be sewing every time when you're tired, like at the end of the day. And it might be change the time of day, because I several times did that horrific thing where I had the fabric looped underneath as I put it through the overlocker.
No.
And it cut a hole with another bit of the fabric.
Yeah.
No.
And I had to have a word with myself and say, right, you're not going to do this again, because what you're going to do is only use the overlocker now when you've got your 100% capacity. And
I have a rule about that.
Smoothing. Yep.
Yeah, I only use my overlocker in daylight, because whenever I use it at night, I cut a hole in something, because I don't know if I'm tired, I don't know if I'm just not focusing, but I'm not as aware. And I know that. So I'm going to throw 2 pieces of advice out for this person. The first one is a practical thing. Have a think about the mistake you're making and have a look at your machine. And I say this from experience. I have been having the most frustrating time recently because my thread kept snapping, or thread wasn't quite hot, my stitches weren't quite holding, and I was like, oh, I'm an idiot, I'm doing something. And then I suddenly went, I've been sewing on this machine for 3 years, I think? 3-4 years? When was the last time I've cleaned it a bit, but when was the last time I actually opened it up and cleaned it? And I took the foot plate out, and sure enough, there was a bit of dust. I'm miming, guys, but I want to say about an inch thick the whole way round, and it was stopping my bobbin moving. But the result, actually, if I look, it started weeks ago. With slightly loose threads, which meant things were slightly out of line and it was making me feel like I felt like I was being gaslighted by my own machine. But it is something. I cleaned it, which is also quite a nice mindful thing to do. And then my sewing was just beautiful, but it felt quite nice to spend some time with my machine that wasn't sewing related. So I would encourage that, clean your machine anyway. But you might want to do something like that just because it might make you feel better to get in touch with your machine without actually having to put any fabric through it.
Yeah.
The other thing I'm going to say, it's the flip side of the you're not there yet. You may be further along than you think you are. One of my top tips is, if you think you're making loads of mistakes and you're not getting better, go find the first thing you made. And I don't mean the first garment, I mean the first thing, the first object that came off your sewing machine, and have a look at it, because it will make you feel better. Or it will get you in touch with why you sew. But it's part of my PhD research is looking at transformation through leisure. And part of that is repeat participation. It's constantly doing it. It's developing that muscle memory. But what we have to do to realize the amount of change that has taken place is to compare to ourselves previously. You have to be able to go, a year ago, I couldn't have done that. So the other thing I'm going to say on that note is to break it down into skills. If you feel like, oh God, all my dresses are working out awfully, but if you look at it and you go, I did a French seam there and that was quite nice. Or, do you know what, that gathering's really consistent. Find the tiny things that you're doing well and give yourself a nice little, give yourself a little gold star and go, look at that. That's the first time I've done that without stabbing myself in the hand. That's the first time I've done it. Exactly. Yeah, we strongly recommend this as a podcast. But you've got to give yourself the little wins.
I would also say on that, sometimes if you're making mistakes, it's because you're pushing yourself to do new things constantly. And it's back to what Mitch was saying about doing the palette cleansers, because often mistakes are because we're up in the stakes and up in the stake. So, I hugely advocate for what Mitch said, which is go back to something that you may have made before and make it again and see what happens this time as well.
We love a palette cleanser.
Yeah.
I think we should share our palette cleansers on the Instagram again.
Yeah.
I think as well, the other thing with when we're talking about patterns, one thing that you could be doing that I was guilty of when I first started sewing is I would make a pattern. It wouldn't go exactly how I wanted it. So I'd go and make another pattern and then that wouldn't go exactly how I wanted it. So I'd make another pattern. There are some patterns that I make that I just dislike. I don't like the way they look when they're finished. I don't like making them. But I will always make any pattern I've got at least 3 times before I decide it goes on the reject pile.
Okay. I agree with that.
Yeah, me too. I agree. You've got to have, like, whether it's a toile or not, whatever you want to call your first version, sometimes it will turn out your best version, but not often, because you've got to go through it to find out what you want to tweak about it and also practice the skills that are in it. No.
Agreed. The other thing is, and I cannot emphasize this enough, make sure you are using the right type of fabric for your patterns.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're making loads of floaty dress patterns, and you're making them in like really quite starchy cotton, and you're wondering why you look like a maiden aunt, you need to use viscose or something drapey or something, a blend. So before you chuck anything on the reject pile, try it in different fabrics, try different lengths. Friday Pattern Company Saltwater looks horrendous on me in the short version. I look absolutely mad. Like it's wrong proportionately for me. Long version, stunning. Love it. Drapey fabric, we're on to a winner. Whatever the stupid polyester peach skin I first made it in, no.
The type of fabric just makes such a huge difference. Mitch, what apart from cushion covers, what is your sort of go-to when you need to make something that you know is going to be a win?
At the minute, it's the Tony shirt. Tony, who was on the last year, possibly of the Sewing Bee series 9. Series 9 of Sewing Bee. He did a collaboration with Brother and with Emporia Patterns.
Yeah.
His own shirt. And it is just a lovely pattern to work with. It's not too complicated, but there's enough in it to keep you interested. Because it's a relatively simple shirt, I can play with prints and patterns, and you can make it in quite a few different fabrics. You can have it as a more lightweight summer shirt, but you can also bulk it up a little bit. And there's loads of hacks you can do with it, turning it into a pullover and things. So it's that nice one where it's a palette cleanser, but it's also one where it can, I'm starting to feel a bit more creative again. Maybe I'll have a go with this, but do it differently. And that's always nice.
I love that. Sam, what's your top palette cleanser?
Anything made of jersey.
Yes.
Because you don't have to stress about the fitting, do you?
Do you know, I really do think you're one of the only people who thinks that, though, because I know so many people are so stressed by sewing with jersey because it stretches as you use it.
I'm building up to running a class.
Are you?
Although I don't teach anymore, I miss teaching. So I thought I'd use those skills, and you know what I'm like about jersey. So I thought, So, she is not only does she like jersey, she is a proselytizing jersey sewer. She tries to get everyone around her to sew jersey as well, and she has given me some, and it is on the list. Jersey. I'm not going to let her go away with not sewing some jersey.
It's gonna happen.
At our house with two choices.
She did. She turned up at my house and went, "Which one do you want?" And I was like, good.
I am the fabric version of like your aunt who always brings too much food.
You are. It's like going to my parents' house and being given things to take back on the flight. And you're like, no.
I mean, I'm definitely a jersey convert. I used to really dislike it because it was a pain to sew. It moved and it stretched and nothing was where it used to be. It used to really annoy me. But I think as I've learnt more about sewing and learnt more about the machine, knowing that, some feet make this really much easier. Yeah. And certain ways of cutting this out means it's still the same shape that I cut out originally. That makes a big difference, I think.
I go on a lot about my overlocker as well, to the point where there are some people at my social who've now bought overlockers.
That is amazing. But that's so funny.
And I'm saying to them, look, there's jersey on the swaps table. Take it to practice. I'm literally handing it away.
You just don't want to take the swaps table stuff home. Like, please take the jersey away.
Well, I used to have to bring it home and put it in my loft, much to my other half's raised eyebrow. Now, Mary takes it. Amazing Mary takes it home. So
praise be to Mary. You've got to love Mary. Just absolute icon that she is. But it is funny because like you love sewing jersey for some reason. Guys, I don't know why, and don't at me here. I love sewing satin. I do. I sew it all the time. I know. I do French seams on satin and I'm in my happy place. I'm like, this is an absolute vibe. But that for me makes sense because even though it's annoying, I like how much I have to concentrate because I can't think about work while I'm sewing satin, and I can't think about my PhD. But I feel like you have to come back to your why, particularly for this person who sent in the dilemma. Why do you sew? Do you sew because you want to make a whole new made wardrobe? Do you sew because you just want some time to yourself? Like, why do you sew? Because I read a great thing recently. Sam, you might have shared it actually, but I don't know. Someone shared it and I was like, that's a great thing. The point of a hobby is not to be good at it. It's to enjoy doing it.
Yeah,
we talked
100%.
about this, about the monetizing of hobbies, the constant side hustle. It drives me nuts. It's just... So
many people go, oh my God, are you going to make those and sell them? I'm like, no, I'm going to make this one and wear it. It's going to be great.
Such a 2010 vibe, wasn't it? Everything you did had to become a side hustle, you know.
And then we have to become girl bosses, which is different to being a regular boss, obviously, because, you know, it's pinker. I hate terms like girl boss and CEO.
We got over an hour in before we found something that annoyed you, Jess.
Can I say, I haven't sworn today. I've nearly sworn 7 or 8 times, but I have not sworn. So, Mitch, for reference, our podcast is rated so you can't swear on it. And Sam spends a lot of time editing me out.
Excellent.
It's normally there's a rant at some point that Jess has to have, and I can't believe we've got right to the end before she rants about the phrase girl boss. So,
I haven't. That was not even a rant. That was just a mild complaint.
I think that was very restrained.
But
very
Jess,
restrained.
I need to tell you what effect you've had on me about French seams. So. Jess and I differ on this. Jess loves a French seam.
I do, because they're like my ultimate way of lazy finishing
it
stuff.
Takes too long. I can't have that top ready to wear to work tomorrow. So, I used to do them a lot when I made bags, so anyway, Jess, I've taken it to the other extreme. In my many quilted jackets I'm making for a very big vlog about quilted jacket patterns, I'm on quilted jacket number 9 now.
She is. She's gonna have to raffle them off. There's not space.
Yeah. But I've gone for it. I'm doing a quilted jacket with French seams, so it's reversible.
Oh my God, yes to all of
that. That
this.
is like extreme.
I don't want to suggest number 10, but have you done one with flat lock seams yet? So it's reversible.
So what do you mean by that? Because I don't know all the fancy words. What do you mean?
Okay, flat lock seams are the kind that you get on the side of particularly men's shirts, and you sew them at. Guys, I'm trying to explain this with my hands, but we'll put it in the show notes. We'll link to it somewhere. They're offset, and then you do that, and then you fold it over, and so it's reinforced. But it means it's like doing a French seam, but it means it's flatter.
Yeah, tricky with quilted fabric. I think I've pushed the limit of my machine with a French seam, I have to say.
Well, the thing is, it always confused me because I don't know, this might be heretical and some people might come for me for this. You know, you can overlock the inside of your French seam before you turn it over to cut off the edge. You don't just have to trim it with scissors. I'm not saying that to you, I just mean to the sewing community in general. You can do that, it's allowed.
Sometimes I will sew a quilted jacket together on my overlocker because it stops all the fluff and everything before I do it.
So brave. Like, oh my God.
I just realised, Jess, this might be the point in the episode, as we haven't yet, to mention the Biscuit Tin membership.
Yes, join the Biscuit Tin. We have got our cute little membership platform where you can join the Biscuit Tin, which is our new community, and you can get bonus episode content, so plus an extra long episode. Sam, correct me if I'm wrong. So when I say extra long, I mean you get the half hour of me chatting,
ranting,
loads of so you know you're going to get all of that. It's going to be great, guys. But also you get special discounts and a fabulous monthly newsletter from myself and Sam, where we tell you what we're up to, what we love, and what we are reading and watching, because you guys really like that a lot. So join us. You can do that through links.
Yeah.
I'm not here for Biscuiteer. I think you should join us in the Biscuit Tin. But
what do you
vote.
think about being a Biscuiteer?
I feel like I would be putting myself between a rock and a hard place, so I'm not going to express an opinion.
I don't know. It feels like muscular to me, and it makes me think of D'Artagnan on the TV program.
Do you know what? You really have made me realise how much I rant in these episodes. So if you do like that, let us know.
Yeah.
I'm a passionate person.
At the end, just 5-minute rant at the end. Just pick a topic that's annoyed you.
Do you know what? Both my sewing machines are working, so I'm just happy. I'm just absolutely like vibing. Last time we did one of these, both my sewing machines were broken, and I was losing my mind a little bit. I was getting a little bit like, oh, happy thing, sorry, I'm throwing this out there because I have talked about this a bit. I have a full-sized ironing board now, and I am so excited. Like, I can press. I'm doing, like, my wedding dress involves like 4 meters of fabric, so I was like, I'm not doing that on a tiny half-size desk ironing board.
I couldn't live without a full-size ironing board. I don't
know. So for anyone who's umming and ahhing about whether do I need one, yes, you do. I promise that you absolutely do. Only
well,
if,
you
obviously,
can't
if you have someone to
if you
store
don't
it.
have a full-size ironing board. That's for sure. No.
I'm sorry, the Argos man who dropped off my ironing board and said to me, "Oh, is that you're going to do lots of your ironing then for your husband?" And I was like, "I beg your pardon."
I mean,
I looked him.
You could do a special episode just on that.
I looked him dead in the eye and said, "What makes you think I'm going to be doing any ironing?" And then I closed the door. So who knows what he thinks I'm doing with it? So yeah, don't restrict your ironing to misogyny.
Moving on from misogynistic ironing, Mitch, is there anything you would like to big up or tell our listeners about that you're up to?
And where can our listeners find you as well?
Yes.
Okay, so anybody can find me on Instagram. I'm at Mitch Bridgewater, and as I said earlier in the podcast, it is an eclectic mix of not just sewing content, but we also last week bought a really old, but not old enough to be valuable, Volkswagen camper van. Yay! So there is a lot of curtain making and upholstering content coming your way, so that's something to look forward to. You'll find me at a WI somewhere in your region at some point, because they seem to like having me come around and do talks. You can buy Love Sewing magazine. I'm the consultant editor now for Love Sewing magazine.
Fabulous. Congrats.
And do a masterclass every issue of that. So, and I'm always looking for content. So please at me on Instagram. Tell me what you'd like to read about, because it would make my job easier.
Fantastic. And we have loved having you. I think you should come visit the Southern Social at some point, and we should have some kind of incredible.
I'll come in the camper van with my sewing machine.
Yeah, I've got room on the drive. You could park. It's fine. Yeah.
Excellent. That's it. Book me in.
I think
I have no idea where you are in the UK, and I'm not expecting you to reveal that on the podcast.
No, we're not. Don't worry.
Yeah. The Southern Social is in Buckinghamshire, so I'll leave you to work out how to.
It's quite away from the Scottish borders.
Well, we need to chat then, because next time I'm up, we'll have to have some kind of fabric.
You will have to come past me. Yeah,
well, exactly.
You'll have to come past me.
Because that's my partner's Scottish family are all from around there, and obviously I am Scottish, so we'll have to wave.
Absolutely.
Sewing road trip, let me know, because you're very
well. Absolutely. Well, that is the dream. That's why we've bought this camper van. What we want to do is do it up to how we want it, and then we want to travel around the world, finding local fabric and making local style garments out of the back of the camper van. That's the dream.
You are my
However,
icon.
the camper van will only do 40 miles an hour, so it could take me a long time.
So you're going to do it quite
to
slowly,
film that.
yeah.
That could make an amazing YouTube channel.
Slow fashion, whether you want it to be or not.
Oh my god, I love it. That has to be your tagline.
I'm pretty invested in watching that. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. I'd be so invested in that. Well, thank you so much, Mitch. You have been such a ray of sunshine. Thank you for joining us on the pod. We have had a great time. We will see all of our wonderful listeners in 2 weeks for our next episode. 2 more to go in season 2 somehow. Yeah. And for our, I'm gonna say it, but I hate saying it, the Biscuiteers, there will be an extra episode in between, so make sure you join to check that out and grab yourself a fabulous discount. So Mitch, thank you so much. Me and Sam will see you next time. Bye.